Yeah, so I mean, this is part of a broader question as well, of the environmental impact of artistic practice, right? It's a very strong part of my um, practice, and I'm constantly sort of assessing what the environmental impacts of my work are. One could argue that if there's no environmental benefit from deploying the AI, even if it's slightly more sustainable than every other data center, it could arguably not be worth it. But I'm open to finding out more, right? Which is the approach that I apply to all of my artistic research. And I was thinking about, you know, the landscape from the perspective of that dragonfly, like becomes less and less livable. I wanted to see then what the world feels like for the dragonfly instead of thinking about it as a tool by which we can, for ourselves, understand what's happening to the environment.
Was there any moment in your development as a human being and artist as well that you had to be a little bit force yourself to look more deeply into environmental issues, or did it come naturally to you?
I would say it's a constantly evolving thing, right? Because the world changes and one has to assess how to respond. But I would say that the kind of core values, I've been constantly interrogating them, but mostly reaffirming them. Those core values are what directed my decision to leave academia for a start. Right? And like with these questions about kind of the environmental impact of my practice, I'm constantly kind of trying to assess what's the right thing to do. I decided that I would try to make a balance, right? And this was a very big shift in my thinking because I had previously always tried to minimize my impact on the world. And I thought, no, actually, maybe I'm thinking about this wrong because we can't have no impact. So, what I should be trying to do is to make sure that I have a net positive impact for the things that I think are important, right? My decision for me is that this is the thing that I'm best at. And so this is how I should be spending my time. And I try my best to amplify its impact and do the best that I can with these works. Um, I also write policy documents and work with policymakers, and write recommendations. And so I also try to involve policymakers, if appropriate, in the participatory research for the works so that there's a more active engagement.
I've got a more generic questions about the way you work and your approach, like in your daily practice.
It depends a little bit on the project. It's hard to say what comes first, but I have a question. I have something that's bothering me, essentially, something that I'm concerned about in the world. And I start to search around, right? And not always consciously. And I'll click on something in my mind, like something will click, and I'll be like, that's the thing, that's really interesting. That's the thing I want to look at. Um, and I'll start to just kind of pootle around that question for a bit. Normally, the exact shape of the work comes in the process of consolidating what I already know, and what I'm learning into something that fits to what I've learnt so far in the research. The Matter of the Soul, I intended to make a haptic installation. And I went to the region and did all the research and was like, oh no, this is sound. This is sound. And then it needs to be sculpture with this motif. The motif had to be there because that's the shape that you see in the landscape. And it's the shape of the water carving through from the glaciers on its like joyful approach to the sea.